So I can almost guarantee that everybody out there has at least one movie that they watch every single Halloween season. I know that a ton of people obviously do for Christmas, but Halloween for me is even more fun when it comes to the entire month because I just get to watch a ton of horror movies and not feel a little weird for it. And in this video, I just want to talk about the films I watch every single year for Halloween, but I also have three different categories here. I have the ones that obviously are in the title, the ones that I do watch every single year, but I also have ones that I'm going to do in the future. And the reason they're in a different category is because maybe I've only seen them once and I'm going to rewatch them this year and then do that every single year on. And then my other one is also just every year, and that is films that I watch every single year that would normally fall into spooky season and all that kind of stuff, but I don't always watch them in the month of October, if that makes sense. But I feel like we should just start it off with my annual watches. And yes, we're going to start it off with my favorite slasher of all time, my favorite slasher character, I should say, and one of my all-time favorite horror movies. That is, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I rewatched this movie I think 2 or 3 nights ago because I'm reviewing the third one very soon. This is one of the reviews from years ago that is still up on the channel. I hate it. It's a terrible review. And there's another movie on this list that also falls into that category, but Nightmare on Elm Street is a fantastic movie. I know that there are definitely parts of it that are dated, and yes, I really don't like the last minute. That last minute of the movie sucks, but everything else about the movie I absolutely love. I think that Wes Craven did an amazing job with the movie, and as I said before, Freddy Krueger is easily my favorite slasher, and I have many reasons for that. I think maybe next year I might make a video on it. I want to be sure that I've seen all the films before I can make a video on it, and this year I might try to watch them all. I know that they kind of fall off after 3, and I have seen 2, and I did review it last year, but the original just has this great group of characters, and because they're all friends, when they start getting picked off, it's so interesting and you actually care what's happening, and for some reason that's rare in a horror movie. And because not sleeping for someone like me is a terrifying thing, especially because there's been many nights where I can't sleep and just the thought of it is scary and everything, but it's just the execution of the movie, literally, that I really, really love. I watch this movie every single Halloween, and I think out of all the movies, maybe besides the one that I'll talk about in a minute, it's the one that I've watched the longest, if that makes sense. Next up, of course, is Halloween. Now, I did do a movie night on this a few nights ago, and of course I watch this one every single year. I mean, these choices are probably a little bit obvious. I mean, it's Halloween. It's literally called the holiday that, you know, it's what's around. I don't know how to word that properly, but I love this movie as well. I really think Michael Myers is a very interesting character. I've kind of gone into that in a few videos, and I'm talking about the original one. It's really the only one that I care to watch every single year. I've only seen the original, the 2018 one, and then of course Halloween Kills, which I did review a few days ago, like a week ago or something like that. I do need to watch the original sequels. I want to get through them all one day, but the original for me is the one that I feel like I need to watch every single year because John Carpenter really captured the spirit and the feel of Halloween. And yes, everything I'm saying here is stuff you've heard before, but it's still so important to always say. And Michael Myers, as I said, is such an interesting character here because you see where he starts off, and that opening is still probably one of my favorite horror movie openings, if not one of my favorite openings of all time. The POV from young Michael Myers, and then go into the future. The kills are very awesome for the most part, besides that one with the terrible ADR, but that's one of those things. This movie is one of those where I acknowledge that there are problems, but at this point, I just don't care. I think I said that in my movie night, that I watch this movie and yeah, I'd be like, okay, well that doesn't make sense, like, oh, that's a little bit weird, oh, that's dated, but I just don't care. I have so much fun with this movie every single time I watch it. Going back to Wes Craven, of course we have to talk about Scream. Now, Scream honestly might even be better than Nightmare on Elm Street. I know a lot of people like it more. For me, they always go back and forth. I guess this year I'll kind of... What are you doing, cat? I guess this year I'll kind of decide after I rewatch it. Lilo. But just like in Nightmare, I think that the movie really works because of the characters, because you have such an interesting group of friends, and you have obviously Ghostface, one of the most iconic killers, but in a different way. One of the most iconic masks of all time, most definitely. I just think that it makes the movie so much better, and it just proves how much of a difference characters make when you actually care about them. But it kind of sucks to say that there are so many horror movies with terrible characters, and it really shows here with such a great movie how much it impacts the overall feel of it, the overall, I guess, impacts the overall impact it has on you. You know what I mean? The kills here, of course, are awesome. I love the slight parody on on it. It's self-aware, but it still has everything you want in a slasher film. It's one of the best horror films of all time, and that's even something that the general audience can agree on. Even people who aren't big on horror, don't love horror, they typically love this movie for a good reason. And finally, talking about the official annual watches, we have to talk about my favorite horror film of all time in my top 10 films ever. Of course, that is The Shining. Now, for me, this is easily the best horror film of all time. Yes, I get it, it's more psychological thriller and stuff, but I still do consider it a horror movie. I think everybody does. It is easily my favorite one. I think that Jack Nicholson gives one of the best performances of all time. Obviously, I think Shelley Duvall is insanely good. Of course, she does not get enough credit for it. She went through hell on set. I think that Danny, the performance by the actor, I think is also named Danny, is one of the best child performances of all time, and it's Kubrick. I mean, you can't really go wrong with his films. This one is, again, my personal favorite of his, as it is in my top 10 films of all time, but I've seen this movie, I think, maybe 4 times more, 4 or 5 at least. And again, I'm going to rewatch it this year. I haven't yet, but I have a lot of movies to watch before the month is over. But this one I always can find time for because it's such an important film to me. It's one of those that when I watch it, it always inspires me. I think it's like the first official horror movie I saw that wasn't like joking around and everything. And maybe that does play a big part into why I love horror and why I love this movie so much. But every single time I watch it, I'm blown away by something new. I think that the camera work obviously is outstanding, but it's the atmosphere and the location that is captured so well in this movie. And it's a long movie, but it never really drags. That's actually one problem I have with the book, because I have read the book, but there are many times in the book where, I think it just said in the book a bunch of times, but there are many times there where it just, lingers and nothing really happens. But in the movie, there's always something interesting happen. The kills are brutal when they happen, but it's very different from a slasher film. It is my favorite horror film of all time. And now we go on to kind of subcategories. I'm not going to talk about these films as much, but when we talk about my future annual watches, what I mean by that is, as I said before, it's a movie that I've either watched like 1 or 2 times, but it's been over the span of a few years, or a film that I watched for the first time last year, and now I'm like, oh my god, how did it take me this long to watch it? And now it's going to be an annual watch. And talking about that, we're going to start off with John Carpenter's The Thing, which I think is even better than Halloween. I think a lot of people really agree on that. When they watch them back to back or at least close together, they agree that The Thing is a better movie, and for me, it definitely is. I actually watched this one for the first time last year on Halloween Day, and then the night I watched Halloween with a bunch of friends, at the time friends, not anymore, but The Thing is one of the best movies I think I've ever seen when it comes to sci-fi horror. It is just outstanding. The practical effects are unbelievable. Still, that's one thing that everybody always talks about with the movie. The practical effects are amazing, and just like The Shining, the atmosphere is just so well captured here. It's a very cold movie, and I feel like if you watched it during winter, it could definitely work, but because of the whole monster aspect, it is interesting to watch during October, and it's John Carpenter, so it's awesome. And going back to the other half of this subcategory, if that makes sense, films that I've seen either once or like a few times, but it's been a few years or they've been scattered over a few years, I'm first going to talk about Sleepy Hollow. Now, I first watched Sleepy Hollow back in 2019 for the first time, and I absolutely love the movie. I still haven't watched it this year, but I'm going to make a movie night on it because I think it's one of Tim Burton's best, and Tim Burton is one of my favorite directors of all time. Actually, last year, I think between like these posters on each side, I had like a picture taped up. I didn't do that this year. Honestly, it took me until like I think yesterday to actually do something to my background with these Walmart lights, which I talked about yesterday, and I have a pumpkin on my desk, but it's out of frame. But anyway, one of the pictures up there was actually Johnny Depp in this movie, obviously, and Johnny Depp's my second favorite actor of all time, so obviously there's that. But it's, another case of Johnny Depp and Tim Burton just hitting it out of the park, like grand slam level. I do think that this is probably my second favorite film of his, behind Edward Scissorhands, and it just has the atmosphere. That's one thing that I really look for when watching a movie during spooky season, is the atmosphere, and here it's captured so well. And keeping on this track, we have to talk about The Exorcist. Now, obviously one of the most iconic movies of all time. A lot of lists consider it the scariest movie of all time, which, at this point isn't really true, but it is a fantastic movie. I think I first watched it back in 2018 2018. Yeah, I think it was 2018, but I didn't pay attention that much. That's just my bad. And then last year I watched it again and I absolutely loved it. I made a revisited video on it and I was just like, how have I not watched this every single year? It's such a fantastic movie. I can't wait to rewatch it this year. Yeah, there are a lot of films on this list that I haven't watched this year, but trust me, I will find time for it. The Exorcist obviously still blows my mind. It has so many layers and the themes of this movie is really what makes it great. And I mean, the practical effects, just like The Thing, are outstanding. And this movie is definitely still creepy. It's not the scariest movie of all time, at least to me. It's definitely creepy and scary at times, but I'm never like, oh, I have to look away from the screen. It's just kind of the thoughts of this and taking a young child and putting them, as the main character and having them getting possessed and everything is a very terrifying thing to do. So it was very smart of the director to do. I'm totally blanking on his name. It's William Friedkin. That's his name. There we go. It's a really great film. And finally, when it comes to this little subcategory, I'm going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Now, I'm not going to say much about the movie, but this one I watched for the first time last year, and I think it definitely battles the first one for the best nightmare film. I've only seen the first three, mind you, but I think that after this, they supposedly go down. So this movie is amazing. Bringing back some characters is very smart, and the location of the movie, again, I don't want to say much if you haven't seen it, and I don't want to say too much for my review, which will be coming soon. I just need to find the time to do it and watch the movie again, because I have watched the first one. I just have to rewatch the second one and then this one. And the second one isn't on this list just because I only want to rewatch it this year. It's not one that I'm going to do every single year. There's my little side rant. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is an amazing film, but more will come later. And finally, I'm just gonna fly through these last ones. This is movies that I watch every single year, but it's not always around the time of Halloween. First up is Silence of the Lambs. Now, I think I've seen this film at least twice, if not 3 times, and it's one that I think when I first watched it, I don't remember what month it was in. It's probably in my letterbox somewhere, so if you want to go look, you can. And then last year we watched it in like August, so it's one that I always watch at a different time of year. It definitely would work better if it was in October, but I feel like anytime in fall, it just kind of works, like in September, October, or November. It's one of those that could work in any other way. One of the best thrillers of all time. I don't really have to say more about it in this video. I'll definitely talk about it more in some other videos. And then Misery, of course, is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I did review it last year. I also did mess up the way I said thriller there. And it's one of the movies that really made me love it. Now, is this a horror movie? No. But is it a thriller? Yes. The location is amazing. Again, just like Silence of the Lambs, but actually even more. It's one that you can kind of watch anytime in the later half of the year, I feel, or at least for me, again, in Canada, watching it in the fall or the winter really works because a lot of the movie is very snowy and everything. So it kind of works like that. I think the performances are outstanding. Kathy Bates, one of the greatest performances of all time. James Caan is amazing. Of course, it's Rob Reiner and adapted from Stephen King. It's a great film. I've talked about it a lot on the channel. That's why I'm just flying through these. And finally, of course, another film I reviewed last year. Again, that's why I'm not saying much about it, but that is Psycho. Obviously, one of the greatest films of all time, one of the best horror movies of all time. Actually, one of the first ones I saw, surprisingly. I know that, being someone who's younger in 2021, or whenever I first watched this movie back in like 2017, 2018, it's not one that you'd expect me to watch for one of my first ones, but because I heard so many great things about it, I watched it and I fell in love with it. Every single time I watch it, it actually gets better and better and better. I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times, but again, I watch it all through the year. Sometimes I watch it in the summer, sometimes I watch it in the winter. That's why it falls into this category. I love the movie. Really, I love every single movie on this list. I thought this would just be fun, kind of like yesterday, but obviously a much longer video. Yesterday, I just talked about 5 essential Halloween songs, but this one I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 films to talk about, and I will do videos on some of these, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Sleepy Hollow, and maybe The Thing. I might talk about The Thing. Not 100% sure on that one, but let me know your annual watches down in the comments below, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Over and out.